But in the general public, it wouldn't have mattered if we weren't serving a good burger. Like people just wanted, honestly, a really great tasting burger. And luckily for us, it is. I mean, we have this wonderful beef source and we season it with salt and pepper and our customers love it.
Welcome to The Bottom Line, the podcast that brings you real stories behind real restaurants. In each episode, we explore the decisions, systems, and stories behind the most successful restaurants out there in the market. No fluff, no hype. Just real operators, real challenges, and real advice from people who know how to get results. Let's get to the bottom line.
2013. By July 3rd of 2014, we opened our first store here in Durango, Colorado. And we centered it around 100% USA grass-fed beef. We centered it around cleaner ingredients, which meant for us, if we looked at what they call the ingredient deck, when you look at what's in your products in a restaurant, we would like to see less than 5 ingredients in that, and hopefully no preservatives, no dyes, no things that we were trying to keep out of the restaurant to elevate the experience and improve the ingredients. So we opened it, like I said, we opened that first store in July of 2014, and we had our first success, which was literally within 6 months, we were in the black. And we had been told in the restaurant space that if we were in the black within our first 2 years, we would be lucky. And so what we learned from that experience in this small town of Durango, Colorado, is that people were interested in A, what they were eating, and B, what was in that food, and C, how that food was produced and cared for. And it really resonated with not only the local population, but we have 1 million tourists a year that come into Durango, Colorado. So the tourists caught on to what we were doing, and we're located in, I guess you could call the central business district, if a town of 21,000 can actually have that. And so we exposed ourselves both to the tourist as well as to the local, and people gravitated towards us.
Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. And how did you tell the story? Because were people informed about different types of meat and the effect of it to their health, like diet? There's something grass-fed, antibiotics, inflammation. Was that a thing back then?
Well, yes and no. In the circles that I was in at the time, grass-fed beef was people were raising grass-fed beef. We were friends with the grass-fed ranch group, but that wasn't the norm necessarily. But I've always been interested in nutrition and food advocacy, and especially with our children having food allergies, this was really something I was passionate about, like eating food as close to the source as possible and as nature intended. I have this belief system that the farther you get away from nature, and away from whole foods, the worse it is for you. So it just made sense to me that cattle should be raised on grass. That's how nature intended it to be. And you run into problems, you need to add antibiotics and hormones because they get sick much more frequently when they are on grain or other substances, because their bodies just aren't designed to process those things. So anyway, the funny part behind the scenes is that Ed and I had some discussions around it, because Ed grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, a gentleman's farm in Wisconsin, and he had some experience raising steer for 4-H. And of course, they raised them on corn.
All corn fed. And
the idea was to fatten them up quickly for market, right? Which is what has become the conventional way of raising beef in the United States. And so we were going back and forth, and we ended up having all these cook-offs at home. We would have, we'd have the grain-fed versus the grass-fed, and we'd have the boys taste test, and then we started bringing people in. And then eventually we actually bought our own grass-fed steer, and that's when we would have people over. So we had this kind of mini restaurant at our home of the grass-fed burgers. Everybody that came over was like, these are the best burgers we've ever had. So that part behind it, I felt really confident about. But in the general public, it wouldn't have mattered if we weren't serving a good burger. Like people just wanted, honestly, a really great tasting burger. And luckily for us, it is. I mean, we have this wonderful beef source and we season it with salt and pepper, and our customers love it.
We, in fact, in both of the markets that we have stores, we've had an award-winning burger. So we have a competition in each of the markets every year for the best of. And in Albuquerque, we've been 8 years running for best burger. In Durango, we've been in the top 2 spots of best burger for the last 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's our menu.
Yeah. But so we were lucky to have a product that stood up to our claim, which is, which I believe that grass-fed beef is better for you. But there are still, in the world of beef, there are a lot of conventional ranchers, and there's a rising, bigger movement of regenerative and grass-fed ranchers that are coming up behind him. And those people did start coming out of the woodwork when we opened our business and going, "Hey, we're excited to see what you're doing." So we ended up meeting more and more people who were in the grass-fed beef movement.
And it's interesting, when we started in 2014, it's in some ways today, it still is a very fragmented industry. Most of the producers are running small herds. So if they're truly doing grass-fed beef, they're running a herd of 50, 100, maybe a couple hundred animals. We need far more than that in our restaurants now for 4 stores. So Jess and I were actually just on a call earlier today where the ranching is secondary to the primary purpose of what this organization does. This organization works on water issues in the West and in Colorado specifically. And what they did is they realized that if they started ranching with grass-fed beef, that they were actually able to take better care of the land, right? Which is part of our mission statement and what we're doing by creating the demand for grass-fed beef. We create the demand for that ranching to happen, for that kind of regenerative agriculture to happen. And this particular group is doing that. And it's interesting that the ranching is almost a byproduct of the water issue that they're working on solving. So even in that, it's the entire ecology of how food is produced, how we source that food, and the impact of sourcing that food and raising that food in today's climate.
Yeah. And I'd love to tell you about the culling program that we use, because that's the thing I'm probably the most proud of with Grassburger, with our sourcing.
Mm-hmm.
So our cattle are culled from herds at a ripe age. So the cattle that we harvest for the restaurant have lived cycles and cycles and cycles of.
They've had multiple calves over a series of years.
And so they're not part of what's become the conventional beef industry, where you have a steer is born and then it's fattened up and it's slaughtered after a year. Like, our cattle actually live a long life on pasture. And then when we harvest them, we use the entire cattle. So we don't use pieces. We use the whole carcass. And I think it's a beautiful, better way of harvesting an animal for food source.
And it also creates a better opportunity for the rancher, because the rancher is able to have multiple seasons with that cow and derive multiple calves from that cow. So again, it supports the rancher. It brings the cost down for us to be able to be in a system like this. And just, again, going back to the environment and to the animal and to the life of the animal, it produces the most natural life for that animal that we harvest and then serve in our restaurant.
How does it work? So when you say like you use all of the animal, usually, a few parts of the animal, maybe some places, some restaurants use like short ribs, some use briskets, like different kinds of, and how do you use the entire animal in the process?
So when the animal has aged out to this point where they're not productive anymore, basically what you do on the animal is it's called a full grind. So instead of most cows or steers that you're taking in, they will cut out the primal cuts, right? So they'll cut out the ribeyes and the tenderloins and they'll move that, that product in a different channel to the restaurant, to different restaurants. And then the remainder of the beef on that animal is then ground into hamburger, and then they add what's called trim to get to a certain fat content. In ours, the entire animal is ground as one. So we get all of the primal cuts, because the primal cuts at that point in the cow's life aren't worth separating. They won't get the price in the market that otherwise they could get. So that's why we call it a full grind, and it's the entire animal. And then we add back trim to get to our, the fat content to make sure that the burgers are juicy and flavorful. And that's grass-fed trim as well.
There's such a unique way. So, in the burger brand that I worked on the steakhouse side, since we butchered the different cuts, so we get the whole rack for the tomahawks, all of these like trimmings. So I'm talking about like American Wagyu, highest grade American Wagyu, as well as the briskets and short ribs, side of the, we would buy and, combine the at one point short ribs, at one point the brisket with the trimmings, and then we would have a very juicy burgers. Like people could be eating, $40 per pound tenderloin in that patty as well. But it's a very unique way to very humane, very economical for the entire ecosystem and for the ranch, right? For the ranch, they are not trying to sell they are selling the entire animal rather than dealing with a distributor to unload the primer costs for a higher dollar value. This is a whole innovation on its own. It's not just the menu, the ingredient, like using the grass fed, but you guys also figured out the entire supply chain, work with the ranch directly. I mean, that's something, isn't it?
Well, we should give but we should give a shout out to Springer Hill. It's there.
Yeah, the group that we work with out of Texas is Springer Hill Ranch, and they've been in the business for over 25, 30 years, and they have the relationships in the grass-fed industry that allow us to source this 100% USA grass-fed beef. It's one of the things currently with the tariffs that we're not experiencing, because we're not reliant on New Zealand or Australia or Central or South America, because we're sourcing our beef as local as possible. Really, I would call us a regional sourcer when it comes to our beef.
And how is the flavor profile? How is it different from like a...
I mean, it's award winning. I mean, not to pat ourselves on the back, but I mean, the people in each of our markets that vote every year vote us award winning. And that, going back to one of Jess's points, that's a great point in the consideration of many people, when they think of grass fed, they don't think of flavorful, and they don't think of, incredible and juicy, and they have a preconceived notion of it. But in our markets where plenty of people serve hamburgers, we have, we've been selected to win.
I bet the flavor is a more like a full beefy flavor, because and I don't want to get into too much in the animal's age, and like the less sweet probably would be my guess, less sweet and more beefy, more of a full flavor and less sweet.
I don't know how to describe it.
It's not a distinct, I mean, you eat what the animal eats, right? So, we've sampled grass-fed beef from other states, and sometimes if it's in a very dry region, you'll taste a particular tone to it. On this beef with this cattle, I would put it up against any burger. I would put it up against any ground hamburger, and I don't think you'd be able to say that one's grass-fed, that one's not.
It's a win-win on all sides. Flavor profile is awesome. Animals and the ecology, the environment is all good. And from a health and diet standpoint, people are eating the best that they can get without the antibiotics that comes from grain fed. I think that's a tremendous achievement. And these are smash burgers. Am I right?
Correct. These are smash burgers made on a chrome top griddle.
And there's potato. The buns are potato.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how did you come up with the recipes?
Well, they've evolved. We started out so simple.
Didn't we mention we have 3 boys?
Yeah.
That was a lot of our taste testing right there.
Yeah. But really, we had when we first opened, we had cheeseburger, burger, bacon burger, and then you could add on, you could add bacon or
green chili.
Yeah. And then it's just changed so much over the years, because then we started looking at, what do people order the most? And then we put that kind of top, which is the bacon, either cheddar burger or bacon cheddar burger. And, or behind that, the green chili jack burger. So then we made that a feature burger, because it seemed like some people would struggle with
what to add,
the adding on portion. So, and then we added the bowls. That was Ed's thing. He loves the bowls.
I do too.
Yeah. And so, because we wanted more, we wanted to be able to offer a meal, a wholesome meal, if you didn't want a burger with, with all the trappings. So, and of course, our pricing when we first opened was very different from today. It's funny how much that has changed in 11 years, like behind the scenes. Our food costs have crept up and crept up and crept up. And then
they exploded after 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen an increase in various commodities of 25 to 50%. Some things for a brief period of time, we've experienced 100% in increases.
Yeah.
That's been a real challenge is making sure that we understand what the value is to the consumer and that we're appropriately charging a price that keeps us sustainable, which means there has to be a certain level of profit in order to be able to reinvest in our team and reinvest in our concept.
Go ahead, Jessie.
No, Naki, you go ahead.
So I was going to ask, like, my experience working with other burger brands. So they go for, grass-fed and great burgers. A lot of them are, like juicy, a lot of toppings and all that. So they are upscale in their own way. And the struggle that they had is the prices are going up. Restaurants in 2021, everyone was flush. In 2022, everyone was flush. But like I opened 2021, 2-3 restaurants, and like we had like McLaren's out the door without license plates. So like probably 1 month's worth of, like in Dallas restaurant, 1 month's worth of McLaren's production in England is probably like right in my door. People were flush, Bitcoin and whatnot. So come 2023, like you see like how, I want to show, there is this graph, San Francisco Fed, that shows like savings, how it went down over the few years, how, people saved during COVID, and then how, okay, I think I got this. Okay. And this is the reason why, this wasn't what I was expecting, to be honest with you. Like I never really quite understood up until I saw this chart over here.
Okay.
Which is here, people saved during COVID $2.1 trillion, and they they basically overspent up until, since, 2024, now they're in the negative, which means like, rather than saving, they are actually spending more than they are saving. So these years, 21, the Gucci stores had lines in front of them. And then going into 2024, everyone is feeling the burn. This is basically like, this is saving. These are the years. These are the excess savings. Excess savings means how much people saved on top of the usual long-term trends. This graph is from the San Francisco Fed. So until I saw this chart, I never really understood how this whole thing came to be. And in that time frame, in 2024, end of 2023, my guess is that the customers did they start to complain about the price increases and all that? No,
this is kind of interesting, Naki, because we watched, just like everybody did in the industry, the trend both on foot traffic and just sheer sales numbers. What the top line sales were, and we were very fortunate in that in 2024 we were up across the board. So
yes, very good.
We were up on our sales, and we had a record year in 24. And what that told us was, the consumer shifts around, right? The upper level consumer may trade down in menu or experience in order to continue eating out. And the lower consumer kind of dropped off because they weren't even able to afford on the QSR side, the McDonald's or the Wendy's or some of these others. So we felt very fortunate, and we've been very appropriate with our price increases. We've tried to really keep in mind what is the value equation for our consumer, and it's challenging in the market today. We're also taking, we're running an organization where you have to take a significant amount of risk, and so you need to make sure that you're able to attract and hire the right people and pay the right people well and offer benefits for team members today, it can be a challenge living in a mountain town and having restaurants 4 hours away.
And there have been a lot of policy changes in the last few years that have been a heavy burden on small businesses behind the scenes.
In Colorado, especially. In Colorado, especially, there's sick time PTO. There's another regulation that mirrors the FMLA on the federal level, except it's at the state level, and you need to keep the person's job open. And again, some of these are very well-intentioned things, but they all add complexity and cost to operating a restaurant today.
100%. And, I feel like we are especially challenged because we're in that middle market. We're a fast casual concept. And so we are very price conscious because we're not fast food and we're not farm to table. And we'll go to kind of equivalent restaurants elsewhere and we'll be shocked at how much they're charging for a grass-fed burger. But that we can't support that with our clientele because we really are in the fast casual segment. And so, and it's just, we went from one store, our original store, to 2, 3, and then 4. We moved out of the farm to table. We changed our supply line.
We had to for consistency.
Yeah.
To be able to offer a product across 2 states and as far apart as we are.
It's funny, Naki, is the thing. So we talked off the record of struggling with consistency and accuracy with takeout. But another big thing that I personally am struggling with behind the scenes is our menu ingredient deck. Like, I would really like to make some major changes. I would like to take seed oil out entirely. I'd like to bring in a different bun, shifting around some of the ingredients and just getting as cleaner and more organic than we currently are. And so is expensive. And now that we're at the size we are, we're big enough that we have to use major food vendors for consistency and, to keep up with our demand. But we're not big enough to necessarily shoulder like bringing in a new product. And that is that.
Or cause a production line to be able to produce something special for us in the way that we want it. So you're starting to see this trend now, going to Jess's point of seed oils, you're starting to see this trend now of people going to tallow, right? Or they're going to avocado oil, or they're going to olive oil, and all of those are alternatives to the seed oil. So the challenge you run into is, how can you get that consistently delivered to your store and not end up with a $9 French fry?
Right.
And so that's the part that we're challenged with right now. And we can kind of feel the wave. The movement is moving in that direction. People are moving away from seed oils. There are several distributors now that are coming out with avocado oils and things that, while they're not as cost effective as a rice bran oil, which is what we're currently using, they're, instead of being 4x, they're X. So, we're getting closer to the point where we could make that switch and still have a value-driven product for people who care about what they're eating.
I will tell you, we have been working on this for months and months and actually years. We've been working on the oil thing for years. And I'm not a patient person. And so it's been really trying. But it's just that balance of, we are a business, we support 100 plus people. And, we need to stay viable too and be able to open the doors. So I'm trying to focus on the good things that we're doing and not just focus on, we need to get to this next and be patient about this.
There's always, it's the restaurant business. There's always one more thing you can improve. So we're on that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. To me, you guys must have told your story very, very, very right for people to not worry about the cost and understand the superiority of the product, how good it is for them compared to other places. Because it's not just that this is that it's not basically like the bottom of the barrel is in the burger business is the frozen patties, right? That they are going to undercut the price for like 30-40%. I actually wrote a newsletter, an article on this exact same thing today, kind of inspired by our conversation on Tuesday, because basically our conversation, and then which sparked the, explaining the perceived value. One of the restaurant groups that we worked with, they were having this problem of basically differentiating themselves from the established like 40-year brand that's had, 10 restaurants, 250 seats in each bar. There's also the bar. So, they can, so they sell tons in liquor and thus, lower their weighted average food cost. And thus, with the help of the frozen patties, with the help of the alcohol sales, they can undercut any kind of competition to their own demise, because they ended up closing like 2-3 of these like ginormous locations. But in that like 2-3 year time frame, like they also make business very challenging for everyone else, because they are undercutting the whole competition. It's the frozen patties and the fresh patties that are done for these restaurants. On top of it is you guys, with the grass fed. How did you figure out like what story to tell here? Whether it's like is it good for the environment, or is it good for you, or good for the animals? How did you figure out which story to tell first and most?
But the story tells itself. Those things are
those three things
story.
You just brought up are they're all told
better
together.
For the planet, better for the animals, better for people, and also it allows us to lift up regenerative agriculture, which in today's world, with the discussion of climate change and the care of the planet, I really believe that what we're talking about, regenerative agricultural practices, rotational pasture practices, and raising livestock and ruminants in this way is part of the solution, and maybe the solution to carbon sequestration, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're behind something and the answers are there, and they are there, it's easy. It speaks for itself. The other parts feel more, like I was saying earlier, feel more complicated to me, like trying to find clean. We do GMO-free buns, GMO-free rice bran oil. We've been able to at least make that step.
No corn syrup.
No corn syrup.
In any of our sauces or in our craft soda.
Yeah. So those pieces, and we've almost eliminated plastic for all of our takeaways, except the top of the soda cup.
Here's the biggest challenge is for us to scale. How do you take it? And this goes to Jess's point earlier. How do you take it from a restaurant where, it can be like Cheers, the television show, right? Like everybody knows everybody. It's just, you're there every day and you're hanging out and you're performing the restaurant every day, to taking it and going, how do we spread the message of why we believe grass-fed is better for the people, animals, and the planet? And the way to do that is to grow the business side. And that is where all the challenge comes in, right? How you scale it and how you have multiple outlets serving the same product with the same consistency and the same consumer experience.
And also the extra lift of the cost behind the scenes, not just the grass, but the parts I was talking about. Every time we have brought in an operational outside person, right away they go to, well, do you have to have a GMO-free bun? Do you have to have biodegradable, this, that, and the other? Like,
is that really important?
Yeah. And
they'll challenge us on it, and and effectively what they're trying to do is we know what they're trying to do. They're trying to improve operations, right? Improve profitability, because it's a game of pennies and nickels, and everywhere you can save, you can become more profitable. But that's where we really learned the lesson, and this was back in 2021, was appropriate pricing. Maintaining a healthy margin for the business is the most important thing. And people will tell you with their dollars whether they believe in what you're selling or not. So, we have to be careful going from a $4 fry to, call it a $5 fry or a $6 fry. How many people will understand taking seed oils out is really important for health, and so that's why we're doing it. How many people will support that? that's part of the risk of being in the business and making those kind of changes. There's nobody out there that we can look at right now and say, well, their sales went up 20% or their sales went down 20% by making this move. That's part of the entrepreneurial part of what we're doing as well.
Yeah. I think that telling that story, like, is it telling that story rigorously? And that story has to be told by you, to not really, like, marketing people can do so much. But if that story is told by you, people who are passionate, people who started this before people knew what the GMO was, 2010, my wife came and I was living alone at that time. I was eating freaking Chef Boyardee, thinking USDA actually would not let Chef Boyardee cans to be, like, sold in the supermarket if it was bad for the health. And apparently USDA didn't really know much about anything. So, but that story, this is basically, this whole thing is owned by you two. And yes.
We have a family member who is an investor who helped us with angel capital at the front end of this.
So
Yes.
what I meant is, like, this story of, your passion is the people, because it starts with your 3 sons being healthy and eating, they have allergies and them eating healthy. Number one, family. You guys are family, the 3 boys, and you started this for your boys, for your passion, and to be able to feed similar, like, other people healthily. And number 2, the animals, all humane. And number 3, the environment and all that. If you tell this story rigorously, day in and day out, and you tell this story, you can hire people to extrapolate your content to record this. Like, for example, take this video, short it out, put in that kind of stuff. Then you will be out in the forefront of this. That's where, like, a few of my clients figured out, like, that's how you beat the competition, by not playing. I mean, there are 2 sides of it. Number 1, I'm rooting for you because it's the good thing to do. Number 2, if you read my article, you will see, like, there is basically, like, levels of businesses, which is, like, some people try to undercut competition in volume and price, and then you guys have spent years on putting this concept together for the good of mankind, for your family. So that's why. But my biggest recommendation is tell your story rigorously. I think, like, there is great stuff on Instagram, but there can be more story told by you in a video format.
That's a good suggestion.
I heard you when you said this is your story. I knew exactly what you meant. It is ours. I mean, it was born out of our need and out of our passion and out of our beliefs. But we couldn't have done it without the angel investor of my auntie. And so thank you, auntie. So there we have it.
Best regards, auntie. Thanks for the investment. So we are here talking about this stuff. Scaling scaling starts with not the next restaurant, but the ones that you already have. The guys who told you, like, non-GMO bun. If you tell your story, that's basically like a 4x, like, changing bun to a non-GMO would be a 4x non-investment, like the opposite of investment, opposite of return on investment. Because people, when they hear this story consistently from you, then they are there to eat that non-GMO bun. They're there to eat this super special thing. If you basically, let's look at the complete opposite. If you didn't tell your story, right, then the lower quality, cheaper product places would start to squeeze your revenues, right? And since this is a business of revenue, then you would have to make, like, difficult choices on the opposite end of the storytelling spectrum is what I'm saying. So if you rigorously tell your story, bonds are a very good investment. in that way. Scaling starts with the existing businesses, because in order to think about the fifth location, okay, I'm having like a whole, I'm moving and I think I'm distracting Ed in the process. I know Ed is following my head. Like this camera, my head, like my seat, nothing worked today. And I know, sorry Ed, I'm distracting you with like.
We've got enemy for construction.
Everywhere. On both sides. That's funny.
And
really, the question, Naki, is when are you coming to Durango to eat a Grassburger?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it.
Bring your wife.
Of course, and the little ones, they are big time burger lovers.
Good. How many?
2. I have 2. One is 8, one is 5. They are 2 princesses. Their favorite food is steak.
There's a sweet spot too. Those are fun ages. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, anytime, either market, we'd be delighted to feed you.
We'd love to host.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. And if you ever come to Miami, I'm here. I would love to host you.
Let us know if you need anything else.
Yeah, if you need anything else, we always jump on. We can find the same clothes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Bottom Line. If you found value in today's conversation, make sure you follow, share, and leave a review. Have a question or need a professional's opinion? Then be sure you reach out using the links in the show notes below. New episodes come out every other week, and until then, we will see you next time.